Former career U.S. diplomat, charged with secretly spying for Cuban intelligence for decades. Biden's allies in Senate demand that Israel limit civilian deaths in Gaza as Congress debates U.S. aid. Israel orders evacuations as it widens offensive, but Palestinians are running out of places to go. Today is Tuesday, December 5th, 2023, and this is the Dunkley Report. Former career U.S. diplomat charged with secretly spying for Cuban intelligence for decades, Biden's allies in Senate demand that Israel limit civilian deaths in Gaza as Congress debates U.S. aid. Israel orders evacuations as it widens offensive, but Palestinians are running out of places to go. Today is Tuesday, December 5th, 2023, and this is the Dunkley Report. Israel's military has renewed calls for mass evacuations from the southern town of Khan Yunis as it widened its ground offensive and bombarded targets across the Gaza Strip. Tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians have sought refuge in the town in recent weeks. The expanded operations follow the expiration of a week-long ceasefire. They are aimed at eliminating Gaza's Hamas rulers, whose Oct. 7. Attack into Israel triggered the deadliest Israeli-Palestinian violence in decades. The war has already killed thousands of Palestinians and displaced over 3/4 of the territory's population of 2.3 million people, who are running out of safe places to go. The Justice Department says a former American diplomat who served as U.S. ambassador to Bolivia has been charged with serving as a covert agent for Cuba's intelligence services since at least 1981. Newly unsealed court papers allege that Manuel Rocha engaged in clandestine activity on Cuba's behalf for decades, including by meeting with Cuban intelligence operatives. The complaint was filed in federal court in Miami and includes charges of acting as an illegal agent of a foreign government and other crimes. He appeared in court Monday afternoon and will remain held until a bond hearing Wednesday. The Supreme Court is wrestling with a nationwide settlement with OxyContin maker Purdue Pharma that would shield members of the Sackler family who own the company from civil lawsuits over the toll of opioids. The justices on Monday seemed by turns reluctant to break up an exhaustively negotiated agreement, but also leery of somehow rewarding the Sacklers. The agreement hammered out with state and local governments, and victims would provide billions of dollars to combat the opioid epidemic. The Sacklers would contribute up to $6 billion and give up ownership of the company, but retain billions more. The company would emerge from bankruptcy as a different entity, with its profits used for treatment and prevention. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is heading to Mexico this week, a trip announced shortly after her agency created a new strike force to help combat illicit fentanyl trafficking. The trip comes as the U.S. and China step up efforts to stop the movement of the powerful opioid and drug-making materials into the United States. The counter-fentanyl strike force will bring together personnel and intelligence from throughout the Treasury Department to more effectively collaborate on stopping the flow of drugs into the country. President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping announced at a November meeting in California that China is telling its chemical companies to curtail shipments to Latin America of the materials used to produce fentanyl. Former Vice President Al Gore says don't trust the oil and gas industry to report their actual carbon pollution, and he adds that the man running United Nations climate talks runs one of the dirtiest oil companies out there. In an interview with the Associated Press, the Nobel Prize-winning climate activist, author, and filmmaker blasts Sultan al-Jaber, the president of the United Nations Climate Talks, who is also president of the National Oil Company of the host nation, United Arab Emirates. Gore says al-Jaber's ADNOC is one of the largest and one of the dirtiest oil companies in the world. The U.S. military says 3 commercial ships in the Red Sea were struck by ballistic missiles fired from Houthi-controlled Yemen, and a U.S. warship shot down 3 drones in self-defense during the hours-long assault. The Iranian-backed Houthi rebels claimed responsibility. The attacks marked an escalation in a series of maritime attacks in the Mideast linked to the Israel-Hamas war, as multiple vessels found themselves in the crosshairs of a single Houthi assault for the first time in the conflict. U.S. Central Command says the attacks represent a direct threat to international commerce and maritime security. It's that time of the year. These are the Associated Press's top 10 songs of 2023, as determined by the Associated Press music writer Maria Sherman. From Victoria Monet's On My Mama, Miley Cyrus's Flowers, Bad Bunny's Monaco, and Ice Spice and Pink Pantheress's Boys a Liar Part 2 to New Jeans, OMG, Paramore's Crave, Troye Sivan's Rush and Zach Bryan and Casey Musgraves, I Remember Everything, to 100 Gex, Dumbest Girl Alive, and Danny Brown's Tantor. There were a lot of amazing songs released in 2023. These just happen to be the best across pop, R&B, K-pop, Latin, country, hyperpop, and more. Arizona is number 1 in the Associated Press men's college basketball poll. The Wildcats rose 1 spot to reach the top spot for the first time since January 2014. Preseason number 1 Kansas is up to 2nd after beating reigning NCAA champion Connecticut. Houston was number 3, followed by Purdue after falling from number 1 to 4th. Number 7, Gonzaga, and number 9 North Carolina each cracked the top 10 for the first time this season. Number 23 Wisconsin, number 24 Clemson, and number 25 San Diego State were the week's new additions. They replaced Villanova, Mississippi State, and Alabama. Yevgeny Prigozhin rose from an ex-con hot dog vendor to winning lucrative Kremlin contracts and heading a formidable mercenary army. But it came to a sudden end when his plane mysteriously exploded on August 23rd. Prigozhin's death put a final exclamation point on the brutal mercenary leader's eventful year. But he was just one of many noteworthy people who died in 2023. The world also said goodbye to former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, former U.S. First Lady Rosalind Carter, former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, former Italian Premier Silvio Berlusconi, entertainers Tina Turner and Harry Belafonte, writer Cormac McCarthy, and many others. Today's news was reported by the Associated Press. This has been the international news for Tuesday, December 5th, 2023. Thanks again for joining us here at the Dunkley Report.